Abraham Lincoln, time machine, back in time, George Lucas, the nature of the dark side, Yoda, Dooku, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, Luke, Leia, and Ben, and then all of the other students and Padawans that may have been taught later by any of those. And now let's go back in time and see if we can change that or fix that. Depending on whatever your point of view is, that could be in a good way or in a bad way. From anyone's point of view, everyone is going to have the same point of view from their point of view. And they're all going to everybody's going to be asking the same, or saying the same thing. Our side is right. That side is wrong. This side is correct. That side is incorrect. This side is legal. That side is legal as long as you stay over there. But if you come over here from that side and you don't follow our legal procedures according to this side, you are not legal. In other words, you are ANA, illegal. However, if you are from this side to start, and you start on this side, then you can do whatever you want, and you are ANA legal. And so, looking at all of this from the beginning, Abraham Lincoln freed the slave. Emancipation Proclamation, 13th Amendment, all of that. In a manner of speaking, because there's a lot more to it than just that. But then out of that came a different direction in the social movement. And many people would call it, and did call it, and do call it, progress. This is progress for society. From the time of the Emancipation Proclamation until now. So let's say that Abraham Lincoln is Yoda, and then you have all of these various learners underneath, and then become the various workers along that way. And so these would be the people that, and again, this is my telling, this is my point of view. Everyone has a point of view. Everyone's going to tell it in a different way. They're going to hear it and see it in a different way. They're going to feel it in a different way, and they're going to imagine it and actually live it in a different way. And some people are going to want to be that way, and other people aren't. But whatever it is, however you're seeing it, you see it your way, I see it my way. That's okay. Everyone has their own point of view. Everyone can say from whatever point of view they want to say, whatever it is they want to say. As long as you're not hurting anybody in a violent way, physically or mentally or emotionally, if they're held captive, anything like that. But on a free speech platform, anyone is able to say anything they want, and of course, this is progress, as I agree that it should be. So I'm going to call it progress from the time Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. I'll even say from the time Abraham Lincoln was elected until now. So I'm just going to say, because I don't know all the exact dates and all of whatever, but I'm just going to say from 1861 until now, you have a movement that comes out from something new that changes the course of the direction of a society, of our nation on this side of the border, where everything is legal on this side of the border. Everything on that side, you've got to stay on that side, and whatever, so on and so forth. And this is not to say, to ascribe to anyone immoral motivations or moral characteristics, as if to say, Whereas in this, to say this, there are people that are just evil and they're born horrible, and that's just the end of it, and that's why they vote with and go to the different church and the other political party, because they're just bad people. Well, that's why, because they were born over there, God must have meant for them to be the bad guys, and so now we must go and destroy evil, the evil people, or whatever it is, because they're over there. But what it really comes down to is the training from and the people that, now the analogy will somewhat break down, because from the time of Lincoln until now, you have a lot of different factors going on. But then also from the Jedi, these are just specific people. And then the factors around them influence who they are and what they become as they make their choices. And you go back and you can look and see what George Lucas said about Star Wars and why he made it and what it means. In a nutshell, look, and I'm just going to try to remember this. I don't want to mess up his words, so I'm not quoting him. But the main idea here from George Lucas is the reason he made Star Wars is to show how, well, it's a story of families, but also to show how good people can turn evil. And again, I'm not using his exact words. I don't remember, so I'm not quoting him. I'm just saying here in my own words what I heard him say. It's about family and families and fathers and sons down through the grandchildren and brothers and sisters and mothers and sons and daughters. But it's also about this republic, and then how good people can turn evil through the choices that they make. And also the people that surround them and the people that are their mentors and these kind of things. And then next, how democracies can fall into a dictatorship or an authoritarian rule. And then, so that's why he wrote Star Wars, and that's the meaning of the prequels. And so this is why I recommend the prequels. Again, the prequels is the best Star Wars. Check it out. Just rewatch the prequels. But what it comes down to now is the social progress. Again, I'm calling it progress, where the freeing of the slave, the black slave, any slave. But we're talking about slavery as it was practiced in the United States up till the 13th Amendment. And this would have been, I'm talking about on the books, legally on the books, okay? We all know that slavery still exists and goes on today, and it's practiced worldwide, and including in America. Sadly, tragically, not even a joke. However, for the purpose of the discussion, the 13th Amendment, the Emancipation Proclamation, these two documents are what I will call Abraham Lincoln's mark on this part of the story. The freeing of the slave. And now here I will say, the black person, the person that was brought here from Africa or any other part of the world, because I don't know all the geography and all that. I had to take geography 2 times. And then in college, and then I finally got a C plus in the second time I took it, but at least I passed it. But whatever. I don't know all the places and all this. I just know that we're talking about people that came from Africa. They brought these people over, and by they I mean whoever it was doing this. And then at some point, a lot of people got together and said, we're not going to have this, when they framed the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, and then it still remained. But as a way to keep it from progressing further, certain states would have laws and here and there, but then the federal government, Abraham Lincoln, during the Civil War, signed the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing all the slaves in the seceded states, or in the states that had seceded. Okay, great. Freed the slaves over there. In a part of the nation that he had, according to his view, the Constitution, the legal and the obligation to sign that proclamation doing such. And a lot of people at that time said, man, this isn't progress, this is horrible, you shouldn't have done that, you're going to make it worse. And other people said, you should go even further and you should just do it all across the country here, even in the north. But he didn't do it, and that's for history historians to debate and all that as to what the real motivation was. But go back and look at the facts and the arguments and the reasons he gave and others gave for and against. So here we get to the 13th Amendment. And okay, you know, the slavery's outlawed. No more slavery. And then, of course, this continues in another fashion where you have the sharecroppers and these kinds of systems where people will live on the land and then they can borrow, but then they owe forever, and then they essentially become slave workers on the land again. And then you go through what is often called, it is called Jim Crow. I call it that because some people don't call it Jim Crow, but I'm going to call it Jim Crow, where you still had this horrible, and I'm saying this from my point of view. Some people didn't see this as horrible. Some people saw it as good, and it made their life a lot better, I guess. But it doesn't make my life any better today, thinking about myself going back and living in that time. And I don't imagine anybody that had to endure being treated as a second class or third class or fourth class citizen at that time, whether they be black or were black or, you know, whatever, Chinese, Caucasian, whatever it was they looked like or felt like or smelled like to other people because they were poor or had a different skin color or whatever. This is the disparity that remains and that is throughout the history of the United States, even though you have various times of progress, such as the beginning of the United States of America, the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, the amendments to the Constitution, the battle in the courts for rights, battle between the state and the federal government, and the people have access to the courts. And then sometimes the president has the power to veto, and sometimes the president does have the power to veto, but sometimes the president is able to and does. And sometimes the president will sign an executive order, a lot of them. And then they will, often some presidents will push the boundaries of what a president should do and is able to do and allowed to do under the Constitution, according to the Constitution, because the president, upon taking the office of this job here, becoming the president, takes an oath to swear allegiance to and uphold the U.S. Constitution. Not to any person, not to any group of people, not to a book of rules, not to the Bible, not to the Quran or the Torah or the Bhagavad Gita or whatever those books are. I don't know. I only read the Bible. But I can tell you this. The United States of America is not based on the Bible. And the President of the United States does not have an obligation to follow the Bible. As a matter of fact, the President of the United States has an obligation to uphold and defend and swear allegiance to the Constitution of the United States of America, above the Bible, in matters of governing the state. And then, of course, I hope the president and any other person that's the president, whether that person be a man or a woman or the current president or any of those that are future presidents, if there is going to be such a thing, will find some knowledge and some reading that they gain that will help them and give them access to something that is outside of their daily job that's basically stressing them out and making them a lot better now that they read this book. That could be the Bible, and whatever. But then to impose that book that they read in their own private devotional time upon the entire nation or world through force or a task force or threats of incarceration or actual incarceration or physical torture, whatever this may be, this is not only against the United States Constitution, it's against the very nature of what the United States is based on, and that we hold these truths to be self-evident. that all men are created equal, and that they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. And these rights, they do include the right to life and the right to liberty and to the pursuit of happiness. And the government doesn't have any business or job or right to tell anybody, me or you, especially your kids or my kids, how to worship, what to worship, how to vote. Now, they can tell you when to vote. That's fine. But they can't tell you how to worship, where to worship, when to worship, and according to which book or according to whose description to worship. They can't do that. The government just can't do that. And so anybody that's doing that in the government, that's not progress. That's taken us backwards beyond previous to the Declaration of Independence. Now, if the government wants to tell you how to worship, what to worship, if to worship or not, and then if you are a worshiper, what the correct definition of your brand of worship is. Let's say this. If a president tells you, this is what a Christian is, and this is what is anti-Christian, and if you are thinking in this way as a Christian, as I've defined it, that's good. But if you are thinking and speaking and writing and acting in a way that's anti-Christian, according to my definition, that's bad, and I'm going to eradicate your way of thinking and your writing and your activity and blah, blah, blah. The president can't do that. The president not only has no business doing that, according to the Constitution, no human being has the ability to tell anybody what they should or shouldn't do, period, with regard to worship, or who to vote for, or how to think, or what opinions they should have. No, that's just not the way it's going to be, or the way it is allowed to be under the U.S. Constitution. But if you want to call it progress, that's not progress, that's taking it backwards. But from the time of Abraham Lincoln till now, there was a battle going on between, some would say good and evil, and others would say left and right. Others would say conservative and liberal. Some would say Republican and Democrat. Some would say religious versus atheist, or Christian versus Muslim, or Jew versus atheist, or whatever. Or Dodgers versus Angels, or Lakers versus Clippers. It's always got to be something. Somebody's team, whose team is winning, and whose zip code is winning. In other words, whose zip code are we rooting for today, right? And they could change. Look, man, your zip code can change in 2 seconds. Your zip code could get entirely swallowed up by the earth in 1 second, and the border could change immediately. It could go one way or another, and then you'd be on this side or that side of the border like that. And if that happens, then what are you going to do? You're going to have to find yourself within a new definition of legal or illegal. So you're either going to then be ANA and illegal, or you're going to be, as in ANA illegal, ANA illegal, or you're going to be ANA legal. You're going to be one of those two things. And you can't be both, depending on what side of the border you're on or the other. So, legal, illegal. So you're either one of those two, depending on the time of day, the placement of the border, and again, the time and place you are at any of those days. Also, the mood could be the mood of the person checking your baggage or whatever. You never know. You just never know in our world. And it's always been this way, and nothing's changed. Nothing's new under the sun. To the writing of books, there's no end, and so on and so forth. So, if people want to argue about it and go back, all the way back, you're going to find the real problem started with the Declaration of Independence. When this group of people decided, we're no longer going to be ruled by one person that doesn't answer to anyone but that one person and God above them. And they could say, well, I answer to God, right? And I tell you what to do. And if you don't like it, then you need to come to me, or you can go to the priest or the Bible, and then you tell them what it is that you don't like, and they come and tell me, and then I tell God, and then God tells me, and I tell them, and then I just keep doing whatever I want, because I'm only going to want to do what God tells me to do. And if you have a problem with that, then you go and talk to the priest or the pastor or the preacher or whoever, and then they come and talk to the Bible, and you guys all have a talk, you and the pastor and the Bible. And then you guys come and talk to me, and then I go and talk to God, and then God will tell me what to do, and I'll just do whatever I want anyways. And Americans said, the people that were then Americans and would become America, is they basically said, they said this. They didn't basically say this, they said this. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And that's it. Kings, no, you're the same as me. And by the way, the only way that you get to be the governor or the king or the president or whatever is the people decide, and then they decide when you're done. The people can 86 you at any time at the ballot box. And if the people have the power to 86 whoever's in the government at the ballot box, you can say to anybody, and the people can say to anybody, anyone, including the president, including any members of the Congress or the House of Representatives or the Senate or the Supreme Court, they can all, each of them, have a vote, one vote, that says, this is what I think. This is who I think should be in there. I want to 86 them, and I want to hire them, and I want to fire them. It's the same thing. It's all numbers. It's just numbers. You want to 86, it means you want to fire. If you want to hire, it means you want to bring them back, whatever. I don't know if there's a number for hire. But 86 means you're fired. 86 them. So a lot of people think they ought to say 86 the president. Some people think they ought to 86 the governor. Some people think they ought to 86 the, whatever it is. But what they need to do is go out and exercise their part of this process. You have the president, you have the courts, you have the Congress, and then you have the people. From the city, locals, dog catcher, town hall, city council, state legislatures, governors, congressional representatives, senators, any judges that you can vote on, and the president. And this is how it works on paper. This is the system that all people can work within with each other, so that people don't have to do what they did in 1861. Essentially, I'm only describing one date. I know a lot of things happened before and after, but let's just say in 1861. And then to now, these were violent times. Those were violent times. And we've seen violence and upheaval and social change, unrest, grotesquity. I mean, there's a lot of bile and pus and filth that you just see coming out of humanity all the time. It's not pretty, and it's not fun to watch. But one thing we can do is we can do our part. We can help our neighbors across the street, next door, in our own home, if we have a home, if we have a house to live in. Thankfully, some of us do. And I hope that we continue to make progress from the time Abraham Lincoln freed the slave till now, when the government is now trying to tell people, me, and I'm a Christian, and the government is now telling me what is and what is not a Christian. And that doesn't fly with me. Now here, I'm getting riled up because I just used the term that doesn't fly. But people have to be trained, and you look at some of the ways that some of these Jedi use the Force, different ways, personalities. Some were good, some were somewhat on the gray area, so to speak. I mean, take a look at Qui-Gon. Take a look at Count Dooku. Heck, even take a look at Yoda. So all of these Jedi and the ones that are trained in the Force have their mentors and their teachers. But now here in our time, you see a lot of people that are saying, well, if I had a time machine, I would go back in time and I would remove, shall I say, Abraham Lincoln from this whole process. But they would possibly might use, or some people might use the word kill instead of the word remove, but I'm going to use the word remove. Remove Abraham Lincoln from the process, but he was assassinated. He was killed. But too late, according to some people that did not prefer the slaves to be freed or the 13th Amendment to be passed. And so on and so forth. Emancipation Proclamation is what I'm talking about in the 13th Amendment. And then now you have, all the way back in this time, people wanting to separate, at the very least, separate black people from white people. And in a more extreme way, I'm not saying that's good or bad, I'm just saying that's what it is for them. I don't like that. I don't prefer it. I don't think it's healthy, and I don't think it's what America's all about, but that's what they want to do. And then other people say that anybody that's not from here originally, even if they're naturalized, they need to leave. They need to go back to where they came from. And then other people say, well, no, they just need to, some people just need to follow in the right footsteps and come here legally and this and that. But as it is now, not only is the government just telling people now how to worship, what isn't a real Christian, for instance, that's one. Now they're rounding people up all over the nation. They're taking over cities and they're just rounding people up. They're just rounding people up that haven't done anything wrong. There's a lot of these people are going to court. And I'm not saying it's everyone, and I'm not saying it's thousands and millions of all of them. But I'm saying they're rounding up people, and they're just rounding these people up. And there doesn't seem to be any accountability. The Congress, the Senate, the courts seem powerless to even address the situation. You have armed militia people roaming the country, like they look like armed thugs. I don't know what their actual job is, but they're dressed in this military gear, and the whole shot, man, including masks often, and they're just rounding people up. They're going into schools, they're going into courthouses, and then next we're talking about threatening to arrest governors and mayors. This isn't progress to me. This does not look like progress to me. This looks like going backwards to pre-Declaration of Independence even. But this can't be happening according to the Constitution. So the people need to step in and say, no, we're going to 86 all of these weirdos that have tried to move beyond the U.S. Constitution at the ballot box. We're going to 86 them at the ballot box. And that's what the people can do. The people can demonstrate peacefully. The people can assemble in peaceful assemblies. The people can and should assemble in large assemblies, peacefully, even silently. There doesn't even have to be a lot of screaming or yelling, but people have to show up for anything that needs to be demonstrated in our time, with all the roundups and the guns and the beatings and the people getting shot. Look, I saw a guy get shot in the head with a rubber bullet, and this is just out of control now. It's time for people to come together and assemble in large groups and just possibly stand there. You just be there. And that's it. And that's all anybody's going to be able to do. At this point, this is what it's come to. So the only thing that must be said is that America is all about progress. And sometimes on the road to progress, people, I hate to say this, but they had to get bashed in the head. And am I going to be able to be one of those people that's going to be out there and sit out there while somebody bashes me in the head? I don't know. I really don't know. But this is America, and I am an American. And the question is, I guess, I don't know, how American am I?